Chapter 11. Harper. The tension in the house eventually gives way to exhaustion, leading to a dense silence broken only by the wind outside and the crackling fire in the living room. The back half of the inn is divided into 3 upstairs bedrooms, with the kitchen dining area and the innkeeper's family quarters on the main level. Freya and her children took 2 of the upstairs bedrooms. Wren offered me the 3rd, but I have no desire to be locked in again. So I told him he and Gray could have it. Cole and Evelyn tried to get me to accept their room for the night, but I'm not going to force them out of their bed, especially if it means they'd have to sleep in the stables, like Cole said when we first got here. Instead, I'm curled up in the cushioned armchair of the main room, with a heavy knit blanket I got from Evelyn. When Evelyn and Cole retire to their bedroom, behind the kitchen, I catch the words negotiation and royal wedding, which makes me sigh. The day must have caught up with me, because I fall asleep and stay that way until a loud sizzle and pop jerk me awake. Gray stands in front of the hearth, feeding wood to the fire. My eyes feel like sandpaper. All the candles were extinguished when everyone went to bed, so the only light in the room comes from the fireplace. Gray's expression is in shadow, but I can tell that he's fully dressed, fully armed. "What's wrong?" I whisper. His voice is equally low. "The fire had gone to embers, my lady." "No, I mean, why aren't you sleeping?" He glances at me. "Perhaps you're unfamiliar with what a guard does." I'm finding that Gray has a dark sense of humor hidden under the formality. It's subversive. I like it. "You think Cole and Evelyn are going to murder Wren in his sleep?" His head shakes. He shakes his head. "My worry lies more with the men who burned the farmhouse." He looks towards the door, where the wind whistles through the lock around the frame. "The snow should cover our tracks, but we would have been easy to follow." I sit up straighter. I hadn't even considered that. "And you think they'd attack the inn?" "Men died." His voice dispassionate, practical. "It is certainly possible." Okay, I'm done sleeping. "Suit yourself." He retreats to the corner by the stairwell, his black clothing blending seamlessly into the darkness. If the firelight didn't glint on the edges of his weapons, I wouldn't know he was there. "Have you been there all night?" I whisper. "Yes." I don't want to be reassured by this, but I am. I dig the phone out of my pocket to check the time. 4:02 a.m. I've been gone for almost 24 hours. Somehow it feels like a tremendous amount of time, yet also not like any time at all. Jake must be flipping out. Without warning, my face begins to crumple. I hope he's flipping out. I hope he's not dead, or in a jail cell, or watching a coroner zip a body bag around Mom. I sniff hard and push the button to bring up his pictures. I want to see my mother, but the phone is still on the last image I looked at, Jake and Noah. They look so happy. It's odd to think of this guy being somewhere in the world, possibly worrying about my brother every bit as much as I am. "What are you doing?" Gray's voice speaks almost right on top of me. I yip and scramble to push the button to turn off the screen. I clutch the phone to my chest. Nothing. He stands behind the chair, looking down at me. His eyes narrow. I tighten my grip on the phone. "You can't have it." "I did not try to take it." He pauses, and a new note enters his voice. Not quite concern, but more surprise. "You're crying." Great. I swipe at my cheeks quickly, and then bury the phone under my blanket. "Don't worry about it." And my voice comes out low and husky. He moves away from the chair, and at first I think he's going back to his corner. His footsteps are light, and he moves like a shadow. Instead, he comes around to sit on the hearth. A low table sits between the chairs, and he drags it between us. Then he unbuckles a small pouch on his belt and withdraws something wrapped in a fold of red fabric. In spite of myself, I'm curious. "What are you doing?" He unwraps the fabric, spreading it across the small table. His eyes flick up to meet mine. "You said you will not sleep. Do you care to play?" In his hand sits a deck of cards. I wet my lips. "You carry playing cards with you?" A ghost of a smile. A guardsman always has cards. The deck is larger than what I'm used to, and the paper looks thicker. "Can I see?" He nods and places them in my hands. They're heavier than I expected, the paper thick with gilded edges. When I look closely, each card appears to be hand-painted with no numbers. but obvious quantities of different things. No clubs and spades here, though. What are these suits? I asked, holding up a card with 6 black circular shapes. He nods at the card. Stones. When I hold up the next, he says crowns. I find another, don't tell me, swords. He nods again. Then gestures to the next in the deck. Hearts, my lady. I spread them out on the table, studying the designs. Number cards are similar to a regular deck from home, though they only go to 9. The face cards are stunningly detailed, from a frowning king with a crown that seems inlaid with real sparkling jewels to a queen whose dress feels like satin is affixed to the cards. The suits on these are definitely by marking, not on the king's, these are identified by a marking on the king's breastplate and on the queen's skirts. No K or Q, but the faces are obvious. Then, when my hand stops on what should be the jack, a blond man holding a shield with a large red heart in the center. Ren, I whisper. Gray taps the edge of the card in my hands. The Prince of Hearts. He reaches out to scoop up the other cards, loosely shuffling them between his hands. That made noise, and it wasn't supposed to, but I'm hoping that the VOD didn't pick it up. Goopy, thank you for the 21-month subscription. I appreciate it. He's on his own playing cards, I mutter. No wonder people recognize him on sight. Wild. Your own leaders are on your currency. Gray gestures for the card I hold. Then deftly shuffles it into the deck. Is this so different? I blink at him. How do you know that? I am not completely ignorant of your world. How could I be? I have no idea. I still don't understand what you were doing there. Why you were kidnapping that girl. Ren says he has to complete a task. He begins to deal the cards between us. There are many things I am forbidden to say. I sigh. Of course. Yet, many I am not. He finishes dealing, leaving 7 cards in front of me and 7 in front of himself. The rest of the deck he places between us, with 1 card face up, the 5 of Swords. Ask your question. Ask your questions. My first question is, what are we playing? King's Ransom. Match the suit or the face. Queens and princes are wild. First person to finish with only kings in their hand is the winner. But if you play a prince card, you can steal one of your opponent's kings. I repeat that back to myself. Matching suits or numbers. My tired brain can manage that. I have a 5 of crowns in my hand, so I lay it down. You know about our money, so that woman wasn't the first you've tried to kidnap. No. He places the 7 of crowns on the pile. I put down a 7 of stones. How many have there been? 3 of stones. Hundreds, I admit. I have lost track. My hand freezes on a 3 of swords. I have no idea what number I was expecting. But that wasn't it. Hundreds. You've kidnapped hundreds of women. I narrow my eyes at him as I work through that in my head. Exactly how old are you? Exactly? That I cannot say. The curse began on the first day of autumn in my 20th year, and lasts 1 season. When it is not broken, the season begins anew. So you've been 20 for, ever? Longer than most, it would seem. He gives a brief shake of his head. When the season begins again, it does not feel as though time has passed. I do not feel as though I have aged. It is more like a dream than a memory. Interesting. How old is Ren? You've arrived on the 18th anniversary of his birth. The 18th? His birthday? Today was his birthday? My voice rises as I remember the instruments, the tables loaded with cakes and pastries and delicacies. The party without people. You kidnap him a girl for his birthday? The look Gray gives me is unyielding. I choose a girl to break the curse. No more, no less. I study him. Okay, so what do I need to do? Once I would have had an answer for you, but I have seen the curse go unbroken for so long that I'm not sure there is anything you can consciously do. Ren said he must complete a task. In a way, his voice is careful, and I sense we're treading near questions he cannot answer. So I am stuck here. He nods. Forever. If the curse goes unbroken, you will return home when the season ends, not before. 3 months. I slide my cards between my hands and try not to let panic overtake me. Nothing has changed. Nothing is different. I can deal with this. What happened to all those other women? That depends on the season and the girl. Did they die? Not all, but some did, yes. He gestures to the pile between us. Play your card, if you please. I drop it on the pile. My breathing feels shallow suddenly. He drops a card on top of mine, and we play in silence for the longest time, the fire snapping behind him. Eventually, he has to draw. So few questions, my lady. Why do you do it? He lays down a queen of stones. I swore an oath to protect the royal family, for the good of Amberfall. Only I have been granted the ability to cross over to your side. He pulls up a strip of leather where armor encircles his forearm, and a silver band gleams beneath. At the start of each season, this band allows me 1 hour to cross over to your world. If I fail to retrieve a girl, there is no chance to break the curse. We must wait out the season and begin again. I roll that around in my head for a minute. Does the season restart for everyone? No, only on the grounds of Iron Rose Castle. Outside of Iron Rose, time marches on. So that's why the seasons changed when we passed through the forest. What about the monster people keep talking about? What do you want to know? Cole says it lives in the castle. He hesitates. That is a rumor to protect the people from the curse, nothing more. What kind of monster is it? His hands go still on his cards. It's always different, but always horrible. Different how? Sometimes the creature is a giant beast with horns and fangs. Sometimes it is reptilian with claws like knives. Sometimes, the worst times, the monster is winged, and it can take to the air. I frown. But it's all one creature? How do you know it's not a bunch of them? His eyes glance up to find mine, but he says nothing. I chew at my lip and lay down another card. Everyone is asleep, but I lower my voice anyway. Ren said his family was killed by the monster, the king and queen. A slow nod. And his sisters, my lady. This knowledge shouldn't tug at something inside of me, but it does. I don't want to feel sympathy for Ren, but thoughts of Jake and my mother are so consuming that I can't help it. Cole and Evelyn think the king and queen have locked themselves away. They don't know they're dead? Gray hesitates. If the people were to discover their rulers are dead, the problems could be far-reaching. Revolts, civil war. The kingdom could be attacked, and we have no army with which to fight. I study him. So the king closed the borders, sealed up the castle. That's why Evelyn said there's no trade. That's why they're worried about invaders. Prince Ren closed the borders, using his father's seal. He started the rumors of possible invasions, inspiring the people to turn away others. He denied trade attempts and claimed it was his father's order. At first it was wise, a protective maneuver, but as time has gone on, you can see that the people have suffered. Yes, I can see. I saw it in Freya and her children, and now though less so, I see it in Cole and Evelyn. We play for a while until my cards run down to 3, and I have to start drawing. I end up with a Prince of Swords. I smile and turn it around. Ha, didn't you say I could kidnap the kings with this? Just one. He tosses it down. I slip the king between my other cards. Now it's just a matter of time until I win. We shall see. Did you play cards with the other hundreds of girls? No. That surprises me. Why not? He rubs his jaw. This is a more complicated question, my lady. Likely for the same reason I never found the need to face them with a weapon. I study him. Are you insulting me? No. He sets down a 4 of hearts. Quite the opposite, in fact. I'm not sure what to do with that. Words spoken in the dark, in the middle of the night, always feel so much heavier than they would at any other time. Do you play cards with Ren? He nods. Often. Can I ask you another question about the curse? You may certainly try. I put down a 2 of hearts, leaving only 2 cards in my hand. The king I kidnapped and the 9 of swords. Gray has 4 cards left in his hands. Who was cursed? Is it just him, or you too? He takes a long breath, and I don't think he's going to answer, but then he says, my answer to that question has changed over time, my lady. Once I would have told you that his highness alone suffered. He places a 9 of hearts in that pile. A 9. I begin to slide my last card free. But then Gray turns around his other 3 cards, all kings. I'm stunned. I've been watching him pick up and lay down cards since we started, and I never would have guessed he had any, much less 3. You win. He doesn't revel in the victory, but instead begins gathering the cards. Another game? Sure. Now I want to watch him do it again. While he deals, I say, you never finish saying who's cursed. If it's not Ren, is it you? No. Nothing so simple. He picks up his cards and meets my eyes. Have you not figured it out yet? The curse torments us all. Chapter 12. Ren. Like so many other things, sleep eludes me. I listen to the wind as it whistles through the shutters. The fire has fallen to almost nothing, but I don't care to feed it. The cold suits my mood. Morning can't be far off, but no light slips through the edges of the shutters, so it must still be early. I've hardly slept. I would like to blame the lumps in this mattress or the rough woolen weave of the blankets, but in truth, it's Cole's parting words that keep ringing through my thoughts. For 5 years, we have begged for help, but our cries go unanswered. Our people starve, and our kinsmen die. I wish I could claim ignorance, but I can't. Regardless of how I choose to keep myself sequestered in the castle, I knew it was happening. My fault. All of it. I keep thinking about those men who burned the house. This man wears a crest, Gray said, but he did not recognize it. Decent weaponry, better than common thieves. 5 men, organized, burning a house. I can't think of why they would do such a thing, unless Freya is lying. But I stop these thoughts in their tracks. This line of thinking is useless. Any soldiers under my command were sent to the border years ago, and I have no one to enforce laws that have clearly long since been forgotten or ignored. 5 years, the innkeeper said. It is truly a miracle that my subjects will still kneel to me, especially since I have nothing to offer them. A gust of wind knocks the shutters against the window, and I jump. I will never find sleep this way. I need a distraction. I pull on my boots and fasten my doublet, leaving my sword and the belt on the chair. I don't want to wake our hosts and risk eavesdroppers, so I quietly ease across the floor to open the door and to call for Gray, but Gray is not there. Surprised, I swing the door fully open. My guard commander sits on the hearth, playing cards with Harper. He spots me immediately and stands. There is no guilt or chagrin? Not sure, it's hyphenated on 2 different lines, and I'm just not sure. Anyways, in his expression, but then there shouldn't be. That said, I can't identify the feeling that swells inside me, hot and sudden. Not quite anger, not quite bitterness. Those are familiar. This is not. What are you doing, I say. Playing cards, says Harper. Keep your voice down. I was not talking to you. I don't care. People are sleeping. Gray steps away from the fire and moves halfway across the room. Forgive me, my lord. How may I serve? His voice is even, formal, and practiced, the way he speaks when he's unsure of my temper. Is the inn secure, I say to him, or have you been too busy to check? His expression does not flicker. The inn is secure. And the horses? I did not want to leave while you slept. I'm awake. Go check. He nods, turns on his heel, and heads for the door without question. He barely pauses to pull his cloak from the hook by the door. Then he's gone, disappearing into the darkness and swirling snow. Bitter wind whips through the doorway, making the fire flicker. The chill reaches me from across the room. I ease down the remaining stairs and take Gray's seat on the hearth. His 6 cards are abandoned in a small pile on the table. Were you in the middle of a game? Oh, sorry. I completely skipped a word there. We were in the middle of a game, Harper says. I see that. I survey the arrangement of cards and pick up Gray's hand. King's Ransom? Gray taught me. She slides her cards together and tosses them on the discard pile, then sits back to draw a blanket up over her body. I gather the cards and begin to shuffle. I feel like arguing, and I'm not entirely sure why. You no longer care to play? You sent my opponent out into the snowstorm. Gray has duties to attend to. Sure he does. My hands go still on the cards. The room is thick with warmth from the fire, and the light plays across her features, making her eyes gleam when she looks at me. She has an uncanny talent of pricking every nerve ending that I have. I hold her gaze. If you mean to say something to me, I insist that you say it. I don't think I need to. We sit there, silently glaring at each other until Gray returns, shaking snow from his cloak and brushing it from his hair. If he notices the tension, he chooses to ignore it. The horse's farewell, I saw no tracks. Good. But I don't look over. I don't want to be the one to break the standoff. As soon as I have the thought, I feel childish, petty, the way I felt when I ordered Gray out into the snow. Harper looks away anyways, but not like she's giving in, more like she doesn't care. Are you done in the bedroom, Prince Wren? As before, she makes my name sound like an insult, but now it makes me surly. Why? Because I'd like to get a few hours of sleep somewhere other than a chair. She folds the blanket over her arm and limps toward the staircase. Her gait takes me by surprise every time. She's so strong-willed, so certain of herself, that I expect her to move with grace and assurance that matches her temperament. I can understand why Evelyn would immediately think of an engagement to align distant nations. Harper speaks in a manner that leaves no room for disrespect, like a ruler, not a subject. She must be stiff and sore because her limp is more pronounced now than it was earlier, and she moves slowly, grasping the railing to climb the stairs. Once she's closed herself into the bedroom, I become very aware of Gray standing to my left. I look down at the cards and shuffle them between my hands. Sit, Commander. Play. He sits. I deal. We play in silence. I like cards. I like games in general, especially games like this. Simple on the surface, where the real strategy lies in figuring out the player. This was one of few things I enjoyed doing with my father. When I was very young, he told me that playing games is less about the cards in my hand or the dice on the board, and more of an opportunity to understand an opponent and the way he thinks. Gray always plays like he fights. Direct, without hesitation. A man trained to make a judgment and act immediately. He plays well, but his moves are never calculated in advance, and they are always in response to mine. I wonder how Harper plays. A part of me hates that Gray already knows. How did you get her to play with you? I finally ask. He lays a card on the pile. I did nothing. I scowl, thinking of the carefully weighed words that led her to shifting an inch closer to me on horseback. This will never work. She does not trust me. Worse, she regards me with contempt. Gray inhales, like he wants to say something, but he must think better of it, because he does nothing more than toss another card on the pile. Say it, I tell him. Whatever it is, Gray, say it. With all due respect, my lord, I believe you regard yourself with contempt. I make a disgusted noise. We battle uphill with this girl. She will present a challenge at every turn. Can you not feel it? If we cannot make progress now, there is no hope in the future. Gray says nothing at all and simply waits for me to play a card. I sigh and place one on the stack. I know you have thoughts, Commander. Yes, many. Out with them. He looks up at me then. You are good at discovering my moves well in advance. I sometimes think you know what cards I will play before I myself do, even without knowing my hand. Silver help. Not cards, I fling them down. Done. I want your thoughts on the girl. I'm giving them to you. He pauses. You speak of progress. You speak of challenges in the future. Your thoughts, as always, are 20 moves ahead. I stare at him. Gray sighs and gathers up the cards. You asked how I got her to play with me, as if there was some trick to it. He wraps up the stack. My lord, I did nothing. I sat down and asked. Chapter 13. Harper. We return to Iron Rose by mid-morning. A part of me wants to resist, but I can't stay at the inn with everyone thinking I'm part of a royal engagement. And the events of the past 24 hours have convinced me that I'm a long way from finding a telephone. Once we're back in the castle, Wren leads me past the spread of food and music in the entrance hall, slow and somber today, to the same bedroom. I refuse to go in. If you think I'm letting you lock me in there again, you've got another thing coming. His eyes are tired, but he pulls the key from the lock and holds it out. The midday meal will be served in a few hours. Can I trust that you will not climb down the trellis in that time? My joints are already stiffening to a point where walking hurts. I won't be climbing down the trellis anytime soon. I take the key from his hand. I won't need to. His expression is not amused. I will send Gray to guard this door. I think Gray needs a chance to sleep. Indeed, should I guard your room? His eyes are dark and intense, lending weight to the words. I think of his breath on my neck at the inn, when he spoke a warning against my skin. He has this uncanny ability to make his words a veiled threat and a whispered promise at the same time. I tuck a loose lock of hair behind my ear and glance away. You don't need to guard my room. I turn and move through the door. Then I stop short. The bed is freshly made, with the pillows fluffed. A fire roars in the fireplace. The marks of dirt and dust I left on the bed coverings yesterday are gone without a trace. A new vase sits on the table, spilling over with white flowers. The scents of jasmine and honeysuckle hang heavy in the air. Ren speaks behind me. As with the music and the food, the castle follows a predetermined order of events. You will find your room set to order daily. I turn and look at him. What if I trash it? My voice is dark with sarcasm, but I'm also genuinely curious. He doesn't play. Try it and see. I approach the flowers, leaning in to inhale. Each petal is perfect. There's not even a dead leaf. These are beautiful. He nods. Arabella loved flowers. You'll find a new arrangement often. His voice is even, without a hint of emotion. Arabella? My elder sister. I freeze. I don't want to feel sympathy, but standing in this room, surrounded by his dead sister's things, I can't ignore it. For the first time, I wonder what it must be like to live in a place that resets over and over again, minus his family. Ren hasn't moved. I don't know what to say. It's one thing to feel sympathy, quite another to extend it. He spares me the uncomfortable silence. I will leave you to your rest, he says. Thank you. He hesitates before the door closes, and for a breath of time, I expect him to trick me and lock it somehow, or to wrestle the key away from me. But maybe this is his version of extending a measure of trust. The door clicks closed, unlocked, and then he's gone. I'm relieved. I need a break. Prisoner or not, I don't need to be filthy. I get in the bathtub. The water is the perfect temperature, soaking the pain out of my muscles and slicking the blood and dirt from my hands. Various jars and bottles sit on the mirrored tray near the window. I have no idea what's what, but it all smells good, so I pick one and dump it into the water. Once I have suds, I go under and scrub my hair. Twice, because it just feels so gross. Then I lie there in the warmth and stare at the ceiling. When I was young and I'd wake with nightmares, my mother always used to say, all you have to do is think of me and I'll appear in your dreams. I'll help you chase the nightmares away. That story always worked, too well, really. I used to think I could summon my mother by thought until I was way too old to keep believing such things. Right now, I would give anything to be able to summon her. I get out of the tub, emotion chokes out of me. I don't want to borrow more clothes from a dead girl, especially Ren's sister. But practicality takes over. I can't walk around naked. Today's doeskin breeches are black, pair comfortably with a looser red top with leather laces up the side. Without any product, my curly hair is wild, so I let it air dry and weave it into a thick, loose braid that hangs over my shoulder. A dozen different pairs of boots line the floor with the dresses, and they fit better than the pair I swiped from the stable, so I choose a black pair that go all the way up to my knees. When I catch a glimpse of myself in the mirror, I look like a roughed-up warrior princess, right down to the faint, mottled blue and yellow skin along the left side of my face. No swelling or pain, though. I owe Evelyn for that. I flop down on the bed and stare at the ceiling. Thoughts of Jake and my mother flicker in my brain, spinning with worry until I can't take it. I need to do something. I need action. Ren didn't say I had to stay in the room. I open the door, fully expecting him to have posted Gray outside, but I'm pleased to find the hallway empty. The violin melody from below makes it impossible to hear anything at all. and I ease into the hallway. I peek into the open rooms as I pass. Each is more lavish than the last, with velvet wall hangings, fur rugs, silver trays with crystal glasses. Wine sits out in some of the rooms, along with small trays of food. The end of the hallway offers a wide staircase and a choice. I can travel down into the darkness or upward into the light. Up I go. The rooms on the 3rd floor are larger than the ones I just left, each more of an apartment than a room. Every door stands open, leading into a sitting room first, then a set of double doors with lushly adorned beds and magnificent wall hangings. Along this hall, a wide opening is set into the wall opposite each doorway, though no furniture occupies these spaces. Weird. Then I figure it out. It's a space for a guard. There were guards to stand. If there were guards to stand. If there were people who needed guarding. By the 4th room, I'm beginning to tire of all the rich elegance. It's like exploring a museum without placards. I look in the 5th door. All I see is blood. It takes my brain a second to catch up. It's a second longer than it takes my nose to inhale the scent of copper. Blood streaks the walls everywhere, in every shade of red, dark slashes on the white walls, rust streaks on the bedclothes, large vicious pools of crimson on the marble floor. Blood isn't all there is. There are thicker things laying in the pools, darker things, visceral things. I stagger and grab the door frame. I can't breathe. My vision spins. No one could lose that much blood and live. No one could lose that much tissue. I'm screaming. I don't know how long I've been doing it, but my throat suddenly feels raw. The scent keeps hitting me, wet copper with an undercurrent of something more bitter. An old penny on my tongue. I gag. My vision swims again. I'm going to pitch forward and pass out in a pool of blood. Arms close around me from behind, dragging me back. Harper. Ren's voice, his arms tight around mine, a solid chest at my back. Blood fills my vision. My screams have dissolved into a thin keening. Harper, look at me. Ren jerks me around, the movement forceful. He gives me a little shake. Look at me. I look at him. Ren, alone. My chest feels like it wants to collapse. If you weren't holding me up, I don't think I'd be on my feet. Gray, my voice cracks. Is that Gray? No, Commander Gray is unharmed. His voice is urgent, yet not without compassion. Calm yourself. I inhale and catch the scent of blood again. It's so thick in the air that my throat closes up and I nearly double over. The world spins again. Everything turns upside down and then right side up. I'm passing out. But no, I'm not. I'm moving down the hallway, wrapped in warmth. The room of horror is shrinking, becoming nothing more than a doorway, and I force my head to swivel up to look at him. It puts my face against Bear's shoulder, which takes me by surprise. His jacket and shirt are gone, and he wears something snug and white and sleeveless, like a heavy undershirt. The neckline is damp, as is the lower half of his jaw. He's warm and smells like mint, and I spot a thin white line of cream. He was shaving. It's so normal, so disarming. I could close my eyes and pretend I'm a little girl again. Before our lives turn to crap, swept up in my father's arms, inhaling his scent just like this. But I'm not. And this is Red. I swipe a trembling hand across my face. A pleasant memory of my father is less welcoming than the carnage in that room. Put me down. I expect him to refuse, but he stops and eases my legs to the ground. We're at the top of the stairwell, and he doesn't move away. His calmness is reassuring and terrifying at the same time. Better? He says quietly. I have no idea. Is that blood real? Quite real, his expression darkens. Perhaps you recall saying a guard was unnecessary? Trust me, I'm totally regretting it. I'm still worried I'm going to be sick all over the velvet carpeting. You knew that was there? Of course. A pause. I usually have Gray bar the doors, but we've been somewhat preoccupied since you arrived. That's a pointed comment, but my thoughts tumble along, trying to find a way to make sense of this. The blood was fresh and real and vivid. Is someone hurt? No, my lady, not in the way you mean. I stare at him. What other way is there? There's no give to his expression. This floor is no place for the weak of stomach. Can you walk? I can walk. I take hold of the banister and step down. My fingers shake from leftover adrenaline, and I feel twitchy and unstable. Ren walks beside me, his manner completely unconcerned. He's so relaxed that it's starting to mess with me, making me feel like I imagined it all. We reach the landing, and I turn, ready to head to my room. But Ren continues around the corner. Come, he says, gesturing with a hand. There is nothing frightening in the kitchens. I don't have a shred of an appetite after seeing the carnage in that room, but I follow him anyways. He can eat. I want information. Is it the monster? I ask in a hushed voice. Is the monster here? No. The blood in that room is unfortunate to look at, but is ultimately of no real concern. He continues down into darkness, leaving me to follow. I do my best to scurry after him. At the bottom of the staircase, light flickers along the shadowed hallway, and warm scents of flour and yeast reach my nose. I should have chosen this path to begin with. Is the blood part of the curse? I whisper. He turns and gestures around, his expression incredulous. All you see is part of the curse. I hesitate, thinking of his dead family, though I can't make wet blood match up with people who've been dead for numerous seasons. I shouldn't have worried, but his voice remains casual and unbothered. Do you care for some wine? I can fetch a bottle from the cellar. No, Ren, I swallow and my voice goes husky. Gray told me about the hundreds of girls. Some who made it out alive, and some who didn't. Who died in that room? No one. That's not possible. I pause and wonder if I should try to run from here again. I edge toward the doorway. Was it from the last girl here? Did she die in there? No, she returned home when the season reset. If not wine, do you prefer mead, or possibly... I don't care what we have to drink. I stop in front of him. My pulse is a roar in my ears, and I'm sure my expression is fierce. How can you talk about lunch when you've got a room full of blood upstairs? I slap my hand against the stone wall. Stop evading my questions. He gives me a level look. Light from the oil lamps flicker across his eyes. I have answered quite directly. If you feel otherwise, you are asking the wrong questions. What is it you want to know? Whose blood is that? The first hint of anger slides into his voice, but it's backed by resignation. The blood you saw was mine. Chapter 14. Ren. I'm rethinking my decision to allow her freedom. She found my former suites terrifying. It does not bode well for what's to come. In truth, I should probably be on my knees, grateful that she hasn't bolted from the castle again, and instead willingly followed me into the warm depths of the palace kitchens. I have fond memories of this part of the castle. I used to come down here often as a child, and the pastry girls would reward me with twists of dough and cups of sweet cream. My nurse was friends with the cook, and they would gossip and laugh while I traced pictures in the flour that seemed to coat everything. My visits to the kitchen stopped, and my nurse disappeared when I asked my father what it meant that no girl could hold his eye longer than a fortnight, or why that would make my mother a pitiable thing. But the memories remain intact. After Lilith cursed me, after the echoing emptiness of the castle began to haunt me, I would seek refuge down here. The warmth and the heavy smell of sugar and yeast remind me of childhood, when I was harmless. Without a staff, the kitchen seems huge. Food sits everywhere, almost spilling out of the shadows. Loaves of bread by the dozen wait on shelves by the hearth. Where a massive fire roars. Soup bubbles in a huge cauldron, and roasted corn chowder the cook would have served with the evening meal. 6 pheasants roast on a slowly turning spit above the fire on the other side of the room. Vegetables have been sliced and roasted to line serving platters. Cheese, nuts, pastries everywhere. The only available workspace is a large table in the center of the room, dusted with sugar and cinnamon and lined with piles of dough. Harper stops in the doorway and looks around. Holy wow. I move to the table and shove the strips of dough to the side, then pull a stool over. Sit, my lady. Wine? I'm pretty sure I'm going to need some. I fetch a bottle from the storeroom at the back of the kitchen, then pour. Harper watches. The weight of her eyes makes me uneasy. I lost the ability to feel self-conscious long ago, or at least I thought I did. I'm used to the weight of prying eyes and critical glances. Harper's judgment is different. She's my final chance. The stakes feel immeasurably high. Once the glasses are full, I hand one to Harper, then down mine in one swallow. I pour more. She takes a small sip, watching me. So you are upset. That makes me pause. What makes you think so? In my experience, men drink like that when they're upset. I don't like that she seems to see right through me. Indeed. And what is your experience? She flinches almost imperceptibly. She swirls the wine in her glass and keeps her voice light. I don't want to talk about me. I take a slower sip from my glass. Do you wish to talk about me? As with any other time, I challenge her. It sparks a light in her eyes. Yes, I do. What really happened in that room? I made a mistake. I take a longer sip of wine. I'm already feeling the effects of the first glass. One of many, in fact. She leans against the table and studies me. What kind of mistake? I hesitate. I weigh my words, take another longer drink. I enjoyed the company of the wrong woman. And what, she tore you apart? Yes. Her question was flippant, and she clearly did not expect that answer. Her voice quiets. Then how are you standing here? Where are your scars? Not all scars can be seen, my lady. I drain the glass again. I somehow think you've already learned that lesson yourself. She goes still. I've shocked her, or offended her, or something else entirely. What made her the wrong woman? She finally asks. To understand that, you must understand our history. I pause. During my grandfather's rule, a small colony of mage-smiths from the western colony of Viren took refuge in Emberfall, near our northern border. From what I remember of my lessons, they were the last remaining mage-smiths and the king of Viren had sought to destroy them all. So they fled east. They swore allegiance to my grandfather and caused a few problems. They would sell their spells to people, and my grandfather saw it as indulgence to allow it. Their magic was small, harmless. He would tax them heavily for the privilege. There were surely tensions there, but he ignored it, or he did not care. When my father reached marrying age, a young woman visited the castle, presenting herself as a candidate for marriage. But she was a mage-smith in disguise, and once she was here, she bewitched my father. She tried to trick him into marriage. She was not very powerful, I say. The guards were able to imprison her and execute her once she confessed. But my grandfather took out his wrath on the mage-smiths who remained. He sent an army, because it was said that as each one of the mage-smiths was killed, the magic would be passed on to the others, making the mage-smiths who remained increasingly powerful. To avoid that, they had to be slaughtered at once. And so they were. I shudder, then continue. The stories of their deaths would put that room to shame. Harper's expression has lost any suspicion or disbelief. So what happened? One escaped, I say, or one was hidden. I pause. And she appeared on the night of my 18th birthday, dressed as a courtier ready to seduce a prince. And she had the strongest magic because she had absorbed all the magic of the rest who were dead? Yes. Why did she curse you, if it was your grandfather who killed them all off? I looked down into my glass. She was not solely seeking revenge. She truly did want to align herself with the royal family. She is quite powerful, but her magic only extends so far. To me, to Grey, to the territory of Iron Rose. She cannot cast her web over my entire kingdom. She seeks true power. For that, she needed me. And you turned her away? I did. I say nothing more, and after a moment, Harper's eyes light with understanding. You turned her away after spending the night with her. Yes. Probably after promising her the world on a string. I promise nothing. I hesitate. though I allowed her to believe our night meant more than it did. Charming. I pour another glass of wine and meet her gaze. I have learned my lesson, my lady, I assure you of that. She twists her glass in her hands and studies me. I wish I could read the emotion in her eyes. After countless seasons of hiding the truth behind pretty lies and extravagant stories, I have laid the truth at her feet, and I am no more sure that she will accept it. Guilt picks at me. I am lying to myself now. I have not laid the entire truth at her feet, not about what I will become. I can offer you no proof, I say to her, if that is what you are after. So she cursed you to perform a task. Her tone is musing. Why won't you tell me what it is? I have found that revealing the nature of the task is the quickest way to assure failure. Why? What am I supposed to do? She says, her expression piercing. Fall in love with you? I almost dropped the glass. Don't look so surprised, she says. I've been trying to think of what would require you to kidnap someone each season, and that's all that makes sense. Now I understand what Gray meant when he said it's not something I can consciously do. I sigh. She continues to watch me, and her eyes narrow. Now I understand why you're shirtless. You screamed, I say, many times, and quite loudly. Would you rather I had waited to dress fully? It is lucky I did not find you face down in a pile of entrails. She makes a face. Can we not use a word like entrails? Does seeing me in a state of undress sway you so easily? That pink on her cheeks darkens, and she looks away at a twist of dough from the side of the table. Gray said you've tried to break this curse with hundreds of women. I have. He also says it doesn't feel like you're aging, that it's more like a dream than a memory. He is not wrong. I refill her glass. 5 years have passed in Emberfall. I'm surprised it's not longer, but I have no way to keep track, and many seasons do not reach their close. She studies me, her expression inscrutable. Why would the season restart earlier? The season begins again if I die. She nearly chokes on a piece of dough. If you die? Yes. But how? At this point, I've tried everything. A fall from a great height, impalement by whatever you can imagine, drowning. I ordered Gray to behead me once because I was curious, but he refused. Okay, I get it. She looks a bit queasy again. So you just come back to life? Every season begins in the room where you first appeared, regardless of how the previous season ended. What happens to the girl when you kill yourself? She has returned home, as far as I know. Harper goes still with her hand on a new twist of dough. So I could kill you and get to go home. I have no way of knowing for sure. The seasons begin again. The girls are gone. She's studying me. I imagining my death, plotting it probably, wondering if it's worth the risk. I shrug and take a sip of wine. Any other season, and I would hand you a weapon and invite you to try. What's different this time? This is my final season, I say quietly. My final chance. If you were to kill me, I would truly die. I lift my eyes to find hers. I have no idea what would happen to you. She goes very quiet. We both eat twists of dough. Then she eventually speaks. It's not a question I'm expecting. Did you get naked with these hundreds of women too? She's so direct that she'd be intimidating under other circumstances. Such questions you ask. She rolls her eyes. Well, that's sure not a no. It is, in fact. I wonder how to be honest. I lured them all into my life. I abhor the idea of luring them into my bed, and I certainly would not force them. In truth, there is no greater crime in Emberfall. Murder? In death, the crime ends. She evaluates me for a long moment. I believe you. I have no reason to lie. Why are you telling me all of this? She says. I thought you couldn't. Why would you think such a thing? I lean across the table and swipe another scrap of dough. Cinnamon and sugar melt on my tongue. The perfect foods from the Great Hall and my personal rooms have grown interminably boring, but eating bits of dough in the kitchen reminds me too much of childhood to hold much rancor. As I lift the piece to my mouth, Harper's down across my chest, following the motion of my arm. Interesting. Especially after her censorious glare when she thought I was betting every young woman Grave drags back to the castle. She pulls a piece of dough for herself. Her eyes shy away from mine now. Because Gray couldn't. He is ordered to keep his silence. Though now I'm curious how much he said. And you are not? I am the crown prince. I pull a larger scrap of dough from the pile and twist it in half, extending a piece to her. I am ordered nothing. Do you always pull women from DC? Not at first, but now yes. Why? I reached for another piece of dough. At first, I sought courtiers from among the noble women of Emberfall. I thought such a curse could easily be undone. Who does not love a prince? My chest tightens as I remember. As it turns out, many women do not. So you eventually ran out of noble women. I sought a woman from the village, I say. I drain my glass again, and will likely need another. Her name was Cora, a very kind, simple girl. I rode into town with much fanfare. Her mother wept when I announced my intention to marry her daughter. The entire village filled with a trunk of offerings, providing a dowry, as if I needed their riches. I hesitate. What happened to Cora? Harper says quietly. The monster tore her limb from limb. Her mother sobbed on my steps and demanded to know why the king had not been able to offer her daughter protection. Harper stops chewing, and the king was dead. Yes, the king was dead. I turned her mother and yes, the king was dead. I turned her mother away. So then what? I declared that I would no longer risk my own people. By that point, I had lost so many. I refused to sacrifice any more. Oh, but people from my home were fair game? I slapped my hand against the table. You must know that my intent with each woman was to break the curse, not prolong it. She glares at me. I glare at her. We fall into silence. The fire crackles in the hearth, and the soup threatens to bubble over. It won't. I know. An invisible chef will stir it and lower the heat before it has a chance. The scent of cooked poultry is beginning to fill the room. Then Harper looks up and meets my eyes. Declared to who? Pardon me? You said you declared you would no longer risk your own people. Who did you declare this to? I'm frozen in place. She narrows her eyes at me. Who's the enchantress? I drain my glass. Her name is Lilith. So she can send me home. No, my lady. Maybe I should ask her. How do I find her? My eyes flick at the corners, as if the conversation could summon the enchantress. You do not want to find her. But do you not understand that she was the cause of the damage you found on the third floor? My voice is low and vicious and full of remembered pain. Harper goes pale. I take a breath. My head is so tangled up with the memories of death and suffering that hundreds of girls swirl through my mind, each one a reminder of how I failed them and failed my people. Gray was wrong. The failed seasons are not like dreams. They're like nightmares. I shift off the stool to stand. Forgive me, my lady. I am keeping you from your rest. Shall I escort you back to your room? Are there any other surprises in the castle? Not today. Then I want to stay here. She grips the edge of the table, as if she's worried I'm going to physically drag her out of the kitchen. I give her a nod and turn for the door. Ren. She calls after me. I pause in the doorway and face her. I'm not going to fall in love with you, she says. Her words are not a surprise, I say. You won't be the first. Chapter 15. Harper. I poke around the kitchen until I find a bowl and a spoon, then move to the cauldron hanging over the fire. A large ladle hangs from a hook set into masonry. I scoop out a large serving, then pull a hunk of bread from the end of a loaf on the counter. Images from the blood-soaked room threaten to replay in my mind, and I shove them away. Instead, my brain is content to fix on what he said about asking Gray to behead him. How he was curious. Yesterday, he talked about throwing musical instruments into the fire. This morning, he mentioned impalement and drowning, and hundreds of women, all of whom failed to fall in love with him. If he just had to find a woman to lust after him, he probably would have been free from this curse in a day. I can't deny that he's easy on the eyes, the high cheekbones, the dark blonde hair that turns gold in the firelight, the brown eyes that reveal nothing. Muscle cords his arms from shoulder to wrist, and he carries himself with purpose. People are quick to kneel before him, but he's also quick to expect it. When he opens his mouth, though, he's arrogant and calculated. There's no shred of vulnerability or weakness. In fact, if there's any weakness, it's the obvious frustration that he can't just wave a hand and order a woman to love him. Something about it all makes me immeasurably sad. I've been trapped here, separated from my family for 2 days. He and Gray have been trapped here for what must feel like forever. They're seeming less harmful and more desperate. That's almost worse. But love. I've never fallen in love with anyone, much less someone who snatched me right off the street. Mom always says she's still in love with Dad, despite his mistakes, despite the fact that he left. And that makes me and Jake crazy. Their relationship sure isn't a standard of true love. I know about Stockholm Syndrome, even if something like that kicks in. If this line of thinking isn't proof already, would that be real love? Anything else clearly isn't enough to break this curse. He didn't kidnap Cora, the poor girl from the village, but she couldn't have loved him, or the curse would have broken. Maybe she loved the idea of being a princess. They've trapped me, but this Lilith trapped them, and now apparently his entire kingdom is suffering, while he sits in the castle just letting it happen. I tear another hunk of bread from the loaf. This time, I hesitate with it halfway in my mouth. Freya and her children stood shivering in the snow, thin as rails. Evelyn and Cole and young Bastion clearly struggled to make do with what they had, despite the fact that it's the middle of winter. I look around this kitchen with new eyes, at the shelves overflowing with food that no one is eating. I then shove the bowl away and go back to my room to fetch a satchel. This time, it's easy to find the trail through the woods. I considered taking a different horse, but Will pricked his ears at me and looked eager to go out again. The saddlebags are double loaded with bread, meats, and pastries on one side, and tightly wrapped bundles of vegetables and hard cheeses on the other. I'm wearing a cloak and 2 sweaters. I found gloves and a quarter sheet for the buckskin in the stable. No one stops me. Then again, I don't ask for permission. When warm sunshine gives way to snow-coated trees, I brace myself for the frigid air. But this afternoon's winter weather seems more temperate. Wind does not weave through the trees, and instead the sun beats down, causing a constant drip, drip, drip around us. Just when I begin to worry I might be heading off course, I come upon the remains of Freya's house. The building is burned to the ground, leaving a blackened stone chimney and to stand sentry over a pile of charred lumber and ash. The bodies are gone, buried in the snow or burned in the fire. I'm not checking. A hill looms ahead, and I remember that from there, it's a straight shot to the inn. I'll be able to see the entire road. I spur Will into a gallop, and we sprint up the hill. A horse-drawn wagon is coming up the other side. Whoa, yells a man. Whoa! 2 cream-colored draft horses shy and prance sideways. Slush and mud spray everywhere. I wrench the reins to the side, trying to avoid a direct collision. The buckskin slips in the slush and nearly dumps me. The wagon, giving a creak and groan, nearly topples, and the man cracks a whip, and the horses quickly yank it straight. It doesn't help his cargo. Several crates spill out the back, falling into the wet snow with a splat. Will champs at the bit and tosses his head, but I keep tight hold on the reins. I'm sorry, I call. I didn't see you. You're sorry, the man growls. He loops reins around a hook and jumps down from the wagon, his boots splashing in the mud. The hood of his cloak falls back, revealing him to be middle-aged with olive skin and dark hair. Shadows cling to his eyes and pool in his cheeks. Yes, I'm sorry. I grip the hilt of my dagger under my cloak in case this goes south. But he doesn't even look at me. Instead, he storms around the back of the wagon to stare at the fallen crates. He swears under his breath, then reaches out to grab one. It must be weighted poorly, because when he tries to drag it into the back of the wagon, he can't get it over the rail. The crate clumsily slips out of his hand and crashes into the slush again. He swears again, and this time it's not under his breath. As soon as I start to wonder why he's not using both hands, His cloak spills and I realize he's missing his left arm. I slide off Will's back and go to the man's side. Here, I'll help you. He ignores me and struggles to maneuver it over the railing. Again, it crashes to the mud. The wood cracks and breaks open at the corner. Silver hell, he snaps. I can appreciate that he wants to do it himself, but I'm kind of done with prideful men. I throw the cloak back over my shoulders and move forward to pick up the other one. It's heavier than I'm ready for. I can't believe he's getting these off the ground one-handed. I stumble in the mud and almost drop it myself, but the man catches the other side, and together we heave it over the side of the wagon, then go back for the others. When we're done, mud clings to our boots, and we're both winded. I fight to straighten the cloak. The man swipes a forearm across his brow. I suppose you think I owe you thanks, girl. You're not getting it. I'll lose a few coins for the damage. He stops short and his eyes fall on the royal lion and rose insignia that's settling into place over my chest. He blinks and takes a step back. The irritation falls out of his voice, replaced with a bit of wonder. I really am sorry, I say. I don't expect thanks, but if you wouldn't mind me using the back of your wagon to get on my horse. Of course. He scrambles ahead of me to catch Will's bridle. Allow me, my lady. I grab a hold of the wagon and pull myself onto the ledge. It's not as precarious as clinging onto the trellises, but it's still a feat of strength and balance, and I always doubt my body. It takes my contracted muscles a moment to ease back into the saddle, but if he notices, the man says nothing. Wren was so confident as he flipped the silver coin to the innkeeper's son. I wish I could do the same thing now. I have no coins to offer. But then I remember the saddlebags. Are you hungry? I say. I have plenty of food. He frowns and shakes his head quickly. I cannot take food from a lady traveling alone. I am not traveling far. I unbuckle a saddlebag and pull out some meat pies in a stretch of cheesecloth. They're still warm. Here. He looks dumbfounded, but takes them, pulling them close to his body. Thank you. I pick up the reins. You're welcome. He takes a step closer. Forgive me, he hesitates. I should apologize. I did not expect a lady of the court to be traveling without protection. I don't need protection, I say. A man's voice calls from behind me. Are you certain, my lady? I whirl around in the saddle, but I recognize the voice now. Wren. And Gray. Their expressions give away nothing. No anger, no humor. Did you think we would not come after you? Wren says. I force my expression to stay equally neutral. You said I wasn't your prisoner. The man with the wagon looks utterly astonished. He glances between me and the men. Your Highness, he says, his voice reverential. He drops to a knee, and right there in the slush. Rise, says Wren. His voice is low and controlled, which I'm beginning to learn is a better clue to his mood. He is more heavily armed than last night. A sword hangs at his hip, and a full quiver of arrows is strapped to the saddle near his knee. Under a cloak, his entire chest is covered in leather, with buckles at his waist and the lion rose insignia embossed in gold over his heart. He was handsome yesterday, but that was nothing on this. All he's missing is a crown. Then again, that might make me forget that he's got an ulterior motive in coming after me. I hate that my heart flutters just a little, sending warmth to my cheeks. Do you have another one of those coins, I say? One for this man's crates I broke when I ran into him. Wren's eyebrows go up, and he sighs and nudges his horse forward. The man shoves himself to his feet and shakes his head fiercely. No, my lady. He holds up the wrapped meat pies. The food is more than enough. Wren pulls coins from a pouch on his belt anyway and extends his hand. His forearms are covered by metal and leather cuffs, laced all the way up to his elbow. Will 2 silvers cover the damage? The man swallows. He looks at the coins held between Wren's fingers, but does not reach for them. You have my thanks, but there was little damage. For your trouble, then, says Wren. With all due respect, I cannot accept that. He glances between Wren and Gray again, then to me. He looks like he wants to pinch himself. I take half a year's time to earn that amount, Your Highness. He pauses. I would be thought a liar or a thief. Why? I say. The guy looks like he wishes he could just climb back on his wagon and ride off. No one has seen the royal family in years. He looks away, and there's shame in his expression. I can barely find work as a porter. No one would believe I came by such coins honestly. Gray rides forwards and pulls a small bag from a pouch at his waist. Here, 25 coppers. Can you spend that? The man blinks. Yes, but Gray tosses him the bag. The man's hand is occupied with the food, and I'm worried the coins are going to sail right into the mud. But he's more agile than I expect. He snatches the pouch out of the air with the same hand that's holding the food. He offers a clumsy bow. You have my thanks, your highness, my lady. Then he backs away to climb into his wagon. He's barely seated before he's clucking to his horses driving down the hill. I wish I could follow right behind him. The weight of Ren's gaze is almost painful. His expression is full of disapproval, and his tone matches. The longer I know you, the less I see your acts as those of bravery. Did you forget the attack last night? Did you forget your people suffering? His jaw tightens. You speak of things you do not know. I think I've seen enough. His expression darkens like thunderclouds rolling over a summer sky. He says nothing. Gray speaks into the silence. You mentioned that you are not a prisoner. Does that mean that this is not an attempt to escape? Of course not. I pat the saddlebag. I'm bringing food to Freya and her kids. You're bringing food? Ren echoes. To the inn. It seemed like they were already short, and we dumped 5 more people on them. He looks incredulous. But why would you not ask? I draw back and stare at him. Ask? Are you kidding me? When you've got a kitchen full of food that's going to be replaced every day. You misunderstand, he puts a hand up. Why would you not ask for assistance? Oh. I didn't think you'd do it, I say quietly. He stares back at me. I wonder if he's going to ask why. Looking at his expression, the trace of resignation that flickers in his eyes, I don't think he needs to. Very well, he says finally. He turns his horse away. You're letting me go? I might fall off this horse in shock. I'm escorting you to the inn, he says, and if I was too stupid to figure it out. Unless you have changed your mind. I sigh and turn my horse to follow.